Hi, and welcome to our discussion of pricing concepts and strategies. So we've covered the product component of the four Ps. We've spent some time on the place component of the four Ps, and this topic will combine both pricing concepts and pricing strategies into one discussion. And we'll briefly discuss what is meant by price. We'll talk a little bit about some pricing concepts. We'll talk about some pricing strategies and some tactics that might go along with the pricing strategies. All right. So price refers to the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service. And again, price refers to the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service. Now, we often think of, because we're so sophisticated, we often think of price as involving money. And in fact, this course is a nice example of that. The tuition for this course is $700 a credit hour. Since it's 3 credits, it means that the price of this course is $2,100, and those of you who enrolled have decided that $2,100 is an acceptable value in return for receiving alleged knowledge about marketing principles. Yeah, price does not have to involve money. I don't know. I think that I can't say this for certain, but I don't think that the university, like if you owned a farm and you went to a university and said, look, I don't have $2,100, but we got 6 really nice cows. I'm not sure that the university would accept the 6 cows in exchange for you enrolling in a 3 credit course. But there's nothing to say that couldn't occur. All right. So again, price is the sum of all values that customers are willing to give up in order to gain benefit from a good or service. And one of the important points about price and it's probably something that you're already aware of, is that it's a really flexible component of the marketing mix in the sense that organizations can adjust prices almost instantaneously. And just to give you an example, and you're as familiar as this as I am, and I'm recording this on the 27th of July, so last Friday, which was the 24th. Every morning, I need to get a life, but every morning I go to Panera, and I live out in Auburn Township. So there's a Panera in Bainbridge, and you say, what does this have to do with anything? So when I drove by the Panera about 7:15 in the morning, there's a Shell station kind of real close to the Panera, and the price was $2.54 per gallon. When I went back at about 10:15 to no, I guess it was 9:15. I'm sorry, about 9:15 to fill up my tank, the price was $2.49. So just in like a 2-hour period, the price of gasoline had changed by 5 cents. And you can see that in what's really allowed for this tremendous flexibility in prices increasingly is the fact that the number of transactions that are done using computers or that are done electronically. So the price can be adjusted, like I say, virtually instantaneously. All right. So, so price is a very flexible component of the marketing mix, much more flexible than the channels and the intermediaries and the logistics stuff that we talked about in association with the place concept. So we're going to look at pricing factors, pricing concepts, and Your book does a really nice job of talking about what's known as the 5C framework of pricing concepts. And so rather than reinvent the wheel, I'm just going to, touch on each one of those concepts and, briefly talk about each one of those concepts. So the first C refers to company objectives, and Exhibit 14.2 is a nice depiction of prospective objectives that companies might have with respect to pricing. And we're not saying that there's a right objective or there's a wrong objective. The key thing to take away from Exhibit 14.2 is that uh, the objective or objectives that an organization chooses for pricing will lead it in a particular direction. So, for example, a profit maximization strategy will lead an organization in a different direction than if it wants to capture market share. So a profit maximization strategy might argue for perhaps a higher price per unit, whereas a capturing market share might argue for a lower price per unit. Again, we're not saying that one is wrong or one is right. It's just that, organizations should think about what they're trying to achieve with pricing before they go through all the kind of the thinking associated with the prices that it's going to eventually offer. A second of the 5 C's is customers, and this brings in a whole lot of different issues or concepts. And you've got demand curves and demand elasticities, and those are important from a marketing perspective, particularly the elasticity of demand, basically the sensitivity of demand to changes in price. And I'm not going to get real technical about the calculations of demand elasticity. I mean, it's something that you should have learned in either Econ 201 or Econ 202. But from a marketing perspective, an understanding of demand elasticity has important implications for pricing. So, and so if you have inelastic demand, and inelastic demand is basically where changes in price don't really result in big changes in the quantity demanded. What that would suggest is that a marketer probably shouldn't lower prices, and in fact, it might argue that a marketer should raise prices in a certain situation. If you have inelastic demand, basically consumers aren't real sensitive to price changes. What it tells you is that by raising price, you're not really going to have a major impact on demand, and so you should at minimum not lower prices, and perhaps you should raise prices. And you say, well, yeah, that's wonderful. And think about it from the perspective of if you travel on airlines. What airlines will often do is they have a whole set of fares. Some of the fares are more pleasure or leisure oriented, because that group of customers tends to be more price elastic. There's also a set of fares that are much higher. They tend to be targeted towards business travel. In business, time tends to be more important than money, so you'll see higher fares associated with if you buy the last couple of days before going on an airplane, the fares are likely to be higher. I mean, if you find out that many of you're going to be getting out of the John Carroll in another year or two, in most cases, if you find out that you've got an interview tomorrow in Charlotte, North Carolina, you're really not going to be shopping around for the cheapest fare. You're going to be looking for something that's going to be able to get you to Charlotte so that you can get to the interview. All right, so customers and demand elasticities. There's also a third C is cost, and that's where we get into the fixed cost that don't vary with output, variable cost that varies with output, marginal cost, the cost of one additional unit, total cost, the sum of fixed cost and variable cost. And having an understanding of the cost and what it means from a pricing perspective, so that one of the things that sometimes happens is if you drive up to let's say if you drive up to a hotel and it's or a motel, we'll say it's a motel. You drive up to a motel at 7 o'clock at night. You walk in and you ask if they have any rooms, and the person behind the desk says, "Yeah, we've got rooms." Well, chances are you're going to be able to negotiate a lower rate. They may have a charge that they might want to charge, let's say $90 for the room, but you may be able to negotiate a lower rate because the marginal cost of putting you in that room, right? If that room goes unused, there's no revenue that motel is going to be able to capture. They're never going to be able to get that back, right? So the rate might be $90, but you might be able to get it for $50 or $60 because the marginal cost of putting you in, they're not going to need to have, they don't need to go out and get more beds. They don't need to go out and get more TVs, whatever, right? So cost is a third of the 5C framework. Competition is a fourth C, and that looks at big consideration with competition is what market structure or is an organization involved in. And so if you remember from your economics, there's monopoly, there's oligopoly, there's monopolistic competition, and then there's pure competition. It's not so much that you sit there and say, well, it's a monopoly, it's an oligopoly, it's monopolistic competition, yada yada yada. It's what those market structures mean for price. And so if there's a monopolistic situation, rub your hands together and say, I can pretty much charge what the market will bear because there's nobody else there's nobody else out there that's going to be able to provide this service, right? On the other hand, monopolistic competition means that there's a lot of competitors out there, and so pricing is it's going to be much different than if you're in a monopoly situation. And then the fifth C of the 5C framework involves channel members. And the thing to keep in mind, and the book talks about it as well, is when organizations are thinking about channels, and this goes back actually to when we talked about vertical marketing systems. Sometimes what will happen, particularly where the organizations are not part of, they're in a channel, but they're not part of a vertical marketing system, is what they may find is that they are doing business with companies that have different objectives with respect to pricing. And so if you think about it, an organization that is looking to maximize profits, right? If it's in a channel with an organization that's looking to capture market share, there's a natural tension there because, as I pointed out earlier, the pricing associated with profit maximization is going to be different than the pricing that's associated with um, capturing market share. All right, so that's a brief overview of the 5C framework. And so that allows us to turn to pricing strategies, which refers to an organization's long-term approach to setting prices. And so the long-term approach will then lead to short-term approaches. And so for each of the long-term approaches that we'll talk about, there are short-term approaches or tactics that organizations can pursue. And there's three primary pricing strategies that organizations can use. They can use what are known as cost-based strategies, where the starting point is the cost associated with a particular product. There's competition-based strategies, and largely what's going on there is the primary focus is what are the competitors doing. And then there are what are known as value-based strategies, and these are strategies that are designed to appeal to consumers and their sense of perceived value. All right. So you say, well, can you give me an example of each one of those? Yeah, cost-based strategies. I mean, one could be one of the most common is what's known as a cost plus strategy. An organization determines what the total cost of the product is. It adds some sort of a markup, and then that becomes the selling price. So, for example, if the cost is $16 and an organization decides to add a $4 markup, then the selling price would be $20. Competition-based strategies, I think the best example of that is, go to any intersection that has two gas stations and you'll see an example of competition-based pricing strategy, because the minute the one gas station on one corner lowers its price or raises its price, the gas station on the other side or the other corner is either raising or lowering its price as well. And then value-based strategies are things, again, that focus on value, and so that's where we get into things like value-based meals. But there's also the pricing that's based on value, from the sense that if you think about, I was thinking about this before I put this discussion together. If and I know I'm an old guy, but the price to see the Rolling Stones this year, I mean, the numbers are just astronomical. And if you think about it, they can charge $100, $200, $300 for a ticket to the Rolling Stones, just because that's an iconic band, right? And it's not that the cost of the amplifiers and renting the venue, yada yada yada, is really all that much different than a group that might not be as popular. It's just that people are willing to pay a hell of a lot more to go see the Rolling Stones than they are to see some other groups. All right. So what are some pricing tactics that can be used? And we'll look briefly at three. There are just a ton of different pricing tactics that are out there. One is the quantity discount, right? And you pretty much know how that works, right? Generally, when you buy in larger quantities, the price per unit is going to be less. So I have two cats, and you say, well, we're really happy for it. Yes, Buddy and Boots. Yes, don't forget their names, Buddy and Boots. They'll be very happy if you remember their names. It's a lot cheaper to buy the cat food in like an 18-pound bag than it is to buy in 5-pound bags. And cheaper in the sense that when I look at the price per pound of the 18-pound bag is lower than the price per pound of the 5-pound bag, right? So quantity discounts. There's also something called product bundle pricing. It's another pricing tactic. And this is where it refers to two or more complementary products offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if the products were sold individually. So, what did you just say? Two or more complementary products are offered as a bundle, and the price of the bundle is less than if the products were sold individually. So one example of that, and it's kind of a blending thing, but a value meal would be an example of that, because if you look and you go, you've got let's say a hamburger and an order of French fries and a soda. The price of that bundle is less than if you bought the hamburger, the fries, and the soda individually, right? Frequently done with telecommunication stuff now. You'll see what you see. You'll see phone, cable, and internet as a package, and so that the sum of that will be less than if you bought the phone, the cable, and the internet separately. And then the third thing we'll talk about is what's known as captive product pricing, and this refers to the price of a product that must be used with another product. Okay, and as a guy, I'm intimately familiar with one, and that's the old razors and razor blades, right? So if you use a razor, that's wonderful, but you need razor blades, and so oftentimes the razor is relatively inexpensive, and the blades are incredibly expensive. Increasingly, what we see is another example of captive product pricing is cell phones. In some cases, you can get a cell phone. And remember, when the cell phone first came out, $3,995, right? Increasingly, you can get cell phones for free, but you have to buy a 2-year service plan, right? And that's so the captive product pricing is another pricing tactic. So I'm a little over 20 minutes. I'll stop there. I'll see you down the road. Bye.